folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Well, we're back to the hot weather. Last week was a little bit of a reprieve, you know. We got a little bit of a break and temperatures were almost down to normal for around here. You know, we'd had about 3 weeks of 95 to 98, even a couple of triple-digit days. And then this week, well, we're back into the hot, and they're calling for the weather forecast for this week is like 99 to 100, 101 all week long. So here we are baking in the sun and the heat again, but we do our best and we're as prepared as we can for the increasing temperatures that many of you are also facing. Today's video, though, I want to cover a couple of things that's happening in the news, but really more focused on helping many of you understand why there is such a push from myself and many others like me to become more self-sufficient, to stock up on food, to produce your own food, whether you're growing in your gardens or your livestock, chickens, anything like that. Why it's becoming more and more imperative that you do that, because a lot of people, and I get the messages, and these aren't people that are really criticizing. They're just trying to understand, you know, why you, myself, and many others are pushing this, that we need to become self-sufficient. We need to get ready because things are getting bad. And when they go out to the grocery store, I mean, prices are high, and no one is doubting that at all. And everyone knows that it's costing more to buy food, but, you know, food is still mostly available. And people don't understand why there is such an urgent push for people to become, you know, more self-sufficient. Well, let me explain, and I hope that this video will do that, because it's not about what's happening now. All the things that are happening now, I keep saying this, we're not dealing with anything really bad right now. I mean, it's really uncomfortable right now, but it's not really bad. What we're dealing with is the beginning stages of what has been planned for our future. The Agenda 2030 plan, the Great Reset plan is in motion, folks. And what we're seeing now, folks like myself that kind of understand what's going on because we've done the research, we see where this is headed. When they talk about shortages of fuel and fertilizers and chemicals and all this kind of stuff, we know where this is headed. And so in today's video, I hope to show you that plan and that path as simply as I can, so that you realize that when I say you need to get your houses in order and prepare, it's not because we're dealing with, you know, some food prices that have gone up that's making it uncomfortable, or, you know, a few bare shelves here and there that will eventually go away, you know, or that we're being told once this war over in Europe is over, everything will be normal again. It's not, folks. This is all part of their plan. And I'm going to show you some of that here in just a minute, because it's not putting us in a good direction, folks. Not for the common man like you and I. It's going to make things very difficult for us, and it's going to put us in a position that we have to make some pretty hard choices for our lives and our families. Because I have so much to cover, I have it on a little phone here, so please forgive me for constantly looking down, because I want to cover everything, and there's some good stuff that I don't want to miss. Over in the Netherlands, and this is all connected. This is the news part, and it's all connected. Over in the Netherlands, they're dealing with some actual major riots, major protests from local farmers, because the government has put into place some carbon emissions rulings that's going to basically put a lot of farmers out of business. They're wanting certain carbon emissions to be reduced by over 50% in the Netherlands, and Dutch farmers they're irate. Okay, watch this video here. This is they say approximately 40,000 farmers that have joined in this protest. It'll be playing right here. They say that they are blocking entrances to supermarkets and warehouses, and basically what's going on is you all heard of the Paris Agreement. You've probably heard of the net zero carbon emissions plan. This is all part of it, okay? the Netherlands, they have put into place some of these plans that these global governments and the global NGOs have all formed together over the last few years to say we need to cut back in these certain carbon emissions and things so that we can get to net zero carbon emissions, meaning that we're not putting out any more carbon emissions than what we're consuming. And the plan is that net zero is by 2050. 2030, they want it by half, cut it in half, and by 2050 to be all the way down to zero. And so we're starting to see a lot of these countries go ahead and implement some of the laws. And so that's what's happening in the Netherlands, and it's causing, well, basically it's going to put a lot of farmers out of business. The details are, they're reducing the amount of fuel that they can use, how long they can run their tractor, how many cattle they can have, where they can have their cattle. They can't graze cattle within so many kilometers of any type of protected environmental areas. It just goes on and on. And it's making it impossible for many farmers, for many ranchers to continue business, and it's making it very difficult for a lot of others. But it's not just happening there. Here's Ireland. They're talking about culling cattle herds in Ireland because to meet emissions targets. Okay, this is all part of this plan. Now, I want to stop right here and remind you that Europe always seems to be just ahead of us. Remember the whole health crisis? They were just ahead of us. And most of these social, very liberal plans and laws and stuff, they're just ahead of us. So if it's happening already, this has already been implemented in parts of Europe, then that means that we're right behind them. And in fact, that is what's happening. We're seeing that happen already. And I do believe that the things that are happening in the world are because of this plan. Is the war, am I saying that the war on Ukraine was planned so that it gives the world an excuse for this? I don't know. Or is it just a coincidence that it just happened and it just worked out really great that they could use Putin's invasion of Ukraine as an excuse for high fuel prices, for shortages in fertilizer, for shortages in food and all that kind of stuff, because that's all part of their plan. Because if you read in their plan, I mean, they don't flat out say that we want to cause food shortages. They don't say that we want to reduce the amount of food that people eat. They say we want to reduce these emissions and this pollutants in these areas. And well, the only way to do it is to reduce the amount of cattle that exist, or the amount of acres that's farmed, and in the end, the amount of people that live. So this is part of their plan. We're already seeing here in the United States talk about, culling, most of it's in relation to this drought, which, there are many that believe that that's also being controlled also because of through weather manipulation, the heat and the drought, because it does play into their plan. Whether or not that is the case, the fact is that it's encouraging farmers to consider and to contemplate their plans of culling their herds. They're also considering culling their herds because of the high cost of just doing business. I've heard that around here, and I've spoken on that several times on this channel, that I have spoken to several farmers in this area where I live, that they're saying they may have to cull their herd, downsize their herd because they can't afford to feed their cattle, because hay prices have gone up, because fertilizer shortages exist, and the price of fertilizer has just skyrocketed. So we're already seeing that effect here in the United States. There's also the poultry, culling of poultry over supposedly a bird flu. I mean, that's what they tell us. I mean, I guess we're supposed to believe that. But the last I checked, it was somewhere around 38 million chickens and other poultry that have been culled because of that. I know there's always going to be some of you that say, well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's part of this plan. Folks, when you start to look at what their plan is, I don't see how you could, connect the dots any other way. When they talk about the how damaging having cattle, beef and milk cattle, are to the environment, and how they have to, we need to reduce the size of the herds globally. And then all of a sudden we see things like fertilizer shortages, we see feed shortages, we see all of these things that's going to negatively affect the cattle business. Kind of makes you wonder. The same thing with farming. I'm going to leave a link to this down in the description, but our very own government back in November 2021 put this out. This is on the whitehouse.gov. It's the long-term strategy of the United States pathway to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. It's like a 65-page document or something. And it's definitely worth skimming through, but I want to show you some just charts, some graphs, and that's in this. This one right here, and some of this may be a little hard because of this fine print, so I'll try to explain. Basically, they're saying that our peak usage was in about 2005. And so based on those numbers, by 2025, we want to be 28% below. We want to cut our emissions by 28% by 2025, which isn't that far away, folks. A lot of people have been saying this, and I agree that the Agenda 2030 plan has kind of been moved up, and the goal is to hit these things by 2025, which is why we're seeing this explosion of events that are really rocking our world and damaging things. By 2050, or sorry, by 2030, they hope to have the levels down to 50 to 52% below usage, and then of course by 2050 to have it down to net zero. Now again, if these are the goals, these are the policies put into place. Okay, this is where every department in the government is on board. You can, if you just Google or whatever search engine you use, Google net zero plan, and you will bring up virtually every major company on the planet, including the oil companies, all have net zero plans on their website. Every single one of them has plans on reducing carbon emissions. Going back to this PDF on whitehouse.gov, here's another one. This is showing energy emissions. And it's interesting how they're all making a downturn in 2020, which also, of course, everyone knows that in 2020 there was global lockdowns, and everyone was shocked when we saw pictures of the streets of Paris and of New York and of other places that were completely bare. It looked like the world had ended. There was no one out driving, and they said it was amazing that emissions dropped so drastically. And I said, yes, this is being done on purpose for that reason. Because that way they can say, hey, remember back in 2020, we did so good. Yeah, it was because of this health crisis, but look what good it did for the environment. That's what we need to go back to. And so if you look at this chart starting in 2020, the projection is to go down on all these things. And of course, the red one is transportation. And of course, we're seeing that. We're seeing these high gas prices. Why? Why is this happening? No one really has a legitimate answer of why this is happening. We want to blame the Biden administration and say, well, the oil companies are doing a good job. But if you look, every single oil company on the planet has a net zero plan to reduce their emissions, to reduce the dependency. It's like they're working themselves out of business on purpose. They want the world to get off of fossil fuels, even though that's their money, where they make their money. And so we're seeing all of a sudden, like, well, why is all this happening? Why all of a sudden? Is there not enough fuel? I mean, just a couple of years ago, the United States was almost completely independent on fuel and then exporting it. And then now we're hearing about diesel shortages and fuel prices are skyrocketing. Why is this happening? It makes no sense, because it's part of the plan, folks. It's part of the plan. It's not a coincidence. It's not because of Putin. It's not just because of a bad luck. Okay, it's all part of their plan. This one here. This is this chart here is talking about the reductions. I understand you probably can't tell. You really have to zoom in. Each one of those lines are slightly different color. But let me explain it to you. This is what needs to be reduced or completely not used to get us to a net zero. And that really high end over there where, where everything's all the way up to the top, That is croplands, landfills, livestock, rice, and wastewater. And the other is coal mining and oil and natural gas, which are actually kind of on the low end. But the things that need to be drastically reduced are those things. And what are we seeing? Almost every one of those things have some kind of something just happening, something weird, some coincidence that's kind of attacking them. Here's another one, kind of the same thing. The big yellow on the end, that's croplands. That big red, that's livestock. So croplands and livestock, they produce lots and lots of pollutants. And so the goal is to reduce the cropland production and the cattle production. And of course, you're going to probably say, well, what are we going to eat? Well, folks, I've talked about this a few times, and I'm sure all of you have noticed it, but have you noticed all the lab-grown food that's just exploding on the market? All the talks about, cricket farms and mealworm farms and lab-grown meats and other things that aren't farmed in the normal way. That's a big part of their plan. The World Economic Forum has been talking about this for years now, for 4, 5, 6 years, that's the move to get us to. The school system in the United Kingdom is already moving that way. They've been talking about how they don't have enough food to feed all the children, so their solution is they're going to feed them insects. We're starting to see many, many more products on the market that are insect protein based, and then we're also seeing tons and tons of products. I see them all every time we go to the store. It's like you see something new that's some kind of lab grown meat or lab grown this or that, and that's there for a reason. Of course, the other way to reduce the need to produce all that is to just have less people, which is interesting that last year, even though there were so many people that had the ding, ding, ding thing, was like the highest death count year on record by far here in the United States. Interesting. I'm sure it's all just a coincidence, folks. So don't look too much into things. Like I said, their plan, it's all over the place. Here's a World Economic Forum, Global Future Council on Net Zero. They have all kinds of stuff. The United Nations, they have their plan for a livable climate, net zero, blah, blah, blah. The sustainability government site, that's the United States government, net zero emissions by 2050, including a 65% reduction by 2030. Goes on, it talks about Biden's executive order. You can probably see that in the little image there. National Grid. This is something else. National Grid plans to go to net zero, the National Grid. Okay, well, we're all dealing with all this. Many of you have been dealing with brownouts and rolling blackouts and stuff, and you're like, why? We've been hearing about this. Did we have this kind of talk last year or the year before or the year before? We've had really hot years on record, okay? Really hot years on record. And we didn't have all over the news of how huge swaths of the United States just doesn't have enough electricity. Why is that? Because of all this net zero carbon emissions baloney. This is the plan, folks. This is why it is so important to become as self-sufficient as possible. This is why it's so important to prep and plan and to grow your own food, raise your own food. It's not because of what we're going through right now, okay? This is leading up to that. This is part of their plan. It's the steps that lead toward one day not having those available. If you're okay with eating bug food and eating lab-grown food that comes from human embryo DNA, which is one of the reasons why they just can't have, not being able to do their abortion thing, then I guess just go ahead and live your life as normal. If you're okay with being a slave to this new global system, then that's okay. If that's what you want and you're okay with that, then go ahead. But folks, if you're not okay with those things, what you're seeing happen is just the beginning. It's just the start of it. It's just the beginning surface of what's about to happen. This stuff is all in place to start taking full effect in 2025. And then, of course, even more so by 2030, and then even more so or finishing it off by 2050. That's not that far away. We're talking 2 to 3 years away. Big parts of these plans will be implemented. And if you're not prepared, if you're not living as sustainable as possible, if you're not growing your own food and had formed little communities so that you can live apart and secede from the society, your only choice is to live in their big cities that they talk about, their big mega cities where they're going to move everyone to and live in little small apartments and you own nothing and you eat their, lab created processed foods. If you're not okay with that, then you need to be self-sufficient, folks. Get your houses in order. Prepare mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.